Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most meticulously documented and, frankly, absolutely baffling aerospace events in modern history. We're talking about the 2004 USS Nimitz Tic Tac incident. Now, whether you're a massive aerospace nerd or just someone fascinated by the sheer limits of human technology, this case is a real game changer. We're not looking at some grainy, out-of-focus photos taken from a lonely dirt road here. No, this is a multi-day event captured by literally the most advanced military sensor networks on the planet. Let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the 2004 Nimitz encounter, tracking the Tic Tac, breaking the laws of physics, the skeptic's perspective, and finally, 3 possible explanations. All right, starting off with Section 1, the 2004 Nimitz encounter. Picture this. It's November 2004, right off the coast of Southern California. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group is out there conducting some routine but heavily monitored training exercises. So, what actually happens when top-tier military sensors start tracking the impossible? Well, radar operators on the USS Princeton were using this brand new, highly advanced radar system when they suddenly started spotting these identified targets just dropping from essentially the edge of space right down to sea level. It was so weird that the operators actually assumed their software was glitching. They went so far as to take the ship's entire brain, the Aegis computer system, completely offline. They recalibrated the whole shebang, booted it back up, and guess what? The tracks came right back, clearer than ever. And this wasn't just a fleeting blink-and-you-miss-it glitch. We're talking persistent tracking that started on November 10th. For days, these operators watched these slow-moving tracks drift south, routinely plummeting tens of thousands of feet in literal seconds. The whole thing built up to the morning of November 14th. That's when 2 FA-18F Super Hornets flown by Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich were totally redirected from their training to go intercept a live, real-world target hovering right over the ocean. When Fravor and Dietrich got to the coordinates, conditions were absolutely perfect. Clear skies, unlimited visibility, you name it. They looked down and saw this massive 150 to 300-foot patch of churning, boiling white water in an ocean that was otherwise completely calm. And hovering maybe 50 feet above it, a solid, white, smooth 40-foot craft. Fravor famously described it as looking exactly like a giant Tic Tac mint. No wings, no exhaust plumes, no visible means of propulsion whatsoever. It was just darting around making these erratic, ping-pong movements, changing direction instantaneously. When Fravor banked his jet to go down and intercept, the craft actually reacted. It mirrored his flight path for a moment before suddenly accelerating and just completely vanishing from sight. All in less than a second. Moving right along to Section 2, tracking the Tic Tac. Now, you might be thinking, hey, human eyes can be tricked, right? And that's totally fair. But look at the sheer volume of independent data here. We aren't just relying on one guy's vision or one faulty radar dish. You've got the USS Princeton's long-range radar tracking it from the ocean surface. You've got the E-2C Hawkeye tracking it from up in the sky. You've got the Super Hornets actively trying to lock on. And down below, the USS Louisiana submarine confirmed absolutely zero acoustic signatures, which means whatever was churning up that water definitely wasn't a submerged sub. It's incredibly difficult to write this off as a simple hardware glitch when so many completely independent systems are all verifying the exact same physical object. But wait, the behavior of this thing gets even stranger. After it vanished from Fravor's sight, the Princeton's radar instantly picked it back up. It had somehow traveled 60 miles in less than a minute and was now hovering precisely at Fravor's top secret encrypted rendezvous point. Seriously, no way it could have just guessed that. Later that afternoon, another pilot, Chad Underwood, flew out and managed to lock his targeting pod onto it. He captured the now famous FLIR-1, that's forward-looking infrared video. Underwood pointed out 2 massive red flags. First, an absolute total absence of any thermal exhaust plume, and second, his internal radar warning receiver was screaming that the target was hitting him with active military-grade radio frequency jamming. Let's dive into Section 3, breaking the laws of physics. Okay, so we have the sensor data and we have the video. But what does the math actually tell us about this? Well, physicists published some kinematic modeling in the journal Entropy, focusing on that crazy 28,000-foot drop. They calculated that executing a descent like that requires a minimum acceleration of 5,600 g-forces. To put that into perspective for you, a highly trained fighter pilot will black out and suffer fatal injuries at around 9 Gs. At 5,600 Gs, human biology is quite literally pulverized into soup, and conventional aerospace materials would just shear apart instantly. And the speed? During that 0.78-second drop, the estimated maximum velocity it reached at the midpoint was roughly 21,400 meters per second. That is Mach 60. You heard that right. Punching through the lower atmosphere at that speed should theoretically create an ionization shockwave that instantly incinerates the craft, not to mention creating an earth-shattering sonic boom. But the guys on the USS Princeton? They heard absolutely nothing.
On top of that, if you take a conservative mass estimate of 1,000 kilograms and move it at Mach 60, the energy required is just immense. The math shows a power output requirement of about 587 gigawatts. That basically means this Tic Tac was outputting the power of several hundred nuclear reactors, completely packed into a 40-foot mint, all without radiating any thermal heat.
Let's ground these insane numbers for a second by doing a direct comparison. Let's stack this anomalous aerial vehicle up against the Navy's premier fighter jet, the Super Hornet. The structural limit of the jet, 9 Gs. The AAV, nearly 6,000. The jet blasts out this incredibly intense thermal plume, while the AAV has 0. A jet breaking the sound barrier hits you with a 130 decibel sonic boom. The AAV operates in total absolute silence. The complete lack of atmospheric friction or kinetic energy transfer here, it flat out defies conventional aerothermal physics. Which brings us to Section 4, the skeptic's perspective. Now, as analytical thinkers, we really can't just accept impossible physics without some serious scrutiny. We have to weigh these claims against grounded, real-world counterarguments. Technical analysts, like McWest, for example, have put forward some really strong alternative theories. As this quote right here points out, skeptics argue that the video isn't showing some alien craft at all. Instead, it's just a distant, conventional jet flying away. The idea is that the camera is picking up a hot exhaust signature from far off, and the glare, or out-of-focus camera bokeh, is basically obscuring the airplane's wings, turning it into a featureless, pill-shaped blob on the monitor. But to be totally thorough, we have to contrast these skeptical hypotheses directly with the military's multi-sensor evidence. So the skeptic relies heavily on the idea of distant jets or maybe slow-moving weather balloons. However, Commander Fravor and his wingman observed the object with their own naked eyes from just half a mile away in broad daylight. Distant commercial jets definitely don't look featureless at that range. And while a weather balloon might look like a slow-moving dot on a screen, a weather balloon certainly can't actively deploy military-grade radio frequency jamming against a fighter jet's targeting radar. Well, what about the very end of the video, where the object seemingly darts off the screen at impossible speeds? Skeptics usually attribute this to a camera artifact known as the parallax illusion. Here's how it works. When the pilot changes the camera's zoom level, the internal gimbal tracking mechanism momentarily loses its lock. As the camera stops panning, the stationary background clouds just keep moving across the frame. This creates a really powerful optical illusion that the target just shot off to the left. Honestly, it's a great reminder of how easily even highly trained observers can get completely tripped up by optical artifacts. Finally, Section 5, 3 possible explanations. So we have this mind-bending sensor data on one side and these grounded optical theories on the other. Where exactly does that leave us? Based on all the analysis, we're basically looking at 3 logical deductions. The first is a foreign or non-state advanced platform. This would mean that someone out there secretly cracked revolutionary physics, like we're talking manipulating gravity to bypass atmospheric friction entirely. The second hypothesis is experimental domestic technology. This suggests the whole Tic Tac thing was just a classified US military drone, or maybe some kind of holographic test meant to spoof our own radars. Actually, scratch that last part, because it is pretty hard to explain how a hologram physically churns up the ocean water, right? And that brings us to the third hypothesis, the multi-system observational cascade. For this to be true, you need an incredibly rare, absolute perfect storm of errors. The multi-million-dollar radar systems had to glitch out due to atmospheric conditions, the highly trained combat pilots had to suffer simultaneous visual misidentification, and the infrared cameras had to suffer optical bloom and parallax errors, all at the exact same time in perfect accidental coordination. Honestly, what makes this incident permanently fascinating is everything that happened afterward. Several crew members reported that unknown personnel actually arrived by helicopter and confiscated the original high-resolution magnetic radar tapes. Tapes that, by the way, remain completely missing to this day. But the undeniable reality of this event did have a massive impact. It actually forced the U.S. Navy to formally alter its policy.
They had to draft standardized guidelines so pilots could report unidentified aerial phenomena without ruining their careers, which eventually led the Pentagon to establish specialized task forces. Which leaves us right here. We've examined the multi-sensor radar data, we've gone over the kinematic math that just totally shatters our understanding of aerothermal limits, and we've heard the grounded, skeptical counterarguments attempting to pull this whole event back down to reality. But at the end of the day, you really have to ask yourself, if the military's most advanced sensor networks didn't all just simultaneously hallucinate, and the physics of what they recorded are supposed to be literally impossible, what exactly were our pilots looking at in the skies off the coast of California back in 2004? It's a question that completely redefines what we think is possible. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything.